Welcome, everybody, to a really fun topic. At least for me, it's really fun. Hopefully for OG and Jared, it'll be fun too. But we're going to be talking about my experience coming up with the idea for and shooting Disclosure, our new short film that's coming out. November 1st, it's coming out. You will be able to watch it. Hopefully, I'll be able to watch it with these guys. We'll get some of the cast and crew together to talk about it and do some interviews. But in the meantime, I was tasked with coming up with some short form videos about what people might be curious about through my experience, both writing, directing, and now it's in post-production, editing and releasing this film. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to go ask OG and Jared if they're willing to just ask me some questions so I know what people are interested in. And I'd love to know what you're interested in as well. So please leave your comments down below. If you have questions for me, I can create videos for you to answer those questions. So leave me a question down below and I will get back to it. And I'm really thankful for these guys because they're also going to be posting this video to their channels, which is awesome. And you know, we've been collaborating through Orange Grove 55 for years. So let me let them introduce themselves and we'll jump right into this. OG 55, tell the folks where you're from.
Jay, I love you, brother. I want to say congratulations, by the way, on your new short film. I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah, you can find me right here on YouTube, Orange Grove 55. Talk a lot of nerdy stuff with these two gentlemen all the time over there. We talk theme parks, studio, corporate stuff. Jared and I recently did a video about the pyramids. We go into all kinds of crazy stuff. So it's a great time over there at OG55. So again, Jay, thank you so much for having me on and congratulations.
Yeah, thank you so much. How about you, Jared? Tell the folks where you come from.
Well, I hail from Missouri. I live in Florida now, but on YouTube, I cover theme parks, entertainment, pop culture, kind of like OG. And first off, thanks for having me on. I love this topic of, I've always been big on, I love the idea of independent stuff happening because we've talked about many times about Hollywood is really hit or miss a lot of times recently. And I love the idea of people doing their own things. And it's also a topic that I have a lot of interest in my life of, like we talked about pyramids with OG and UFOs, all that stuff. I find vastly interesting, ancient civilizations, all that stuff. So it's right down my alley of everything I like to talk about. And I always enjoy your insights when we break down movies, because a lot of times you'll be saying something like, Jay says it better than I could. That's what I was thinking, but he says it so much nicer than I can. So I'm really looking forward to this, and I appreciate being part of this, and I'm looking forward to checking it out on November 1st.
I can't wait. It's going to be really fun, and I really can't wait to have you guys react to it and ask us questions once you've seen the whole thing. We're not going to get into spoilers here. So that's the one category that I'm not going to do is I'm not going to talk about the spoilers because I want everybody to be able to watch it and have a good time. These guys haven't seen it, so they can't spoil it, but I'm the one that can still spoil it. So I'm going to try to avoid that. But other than that, all questions are on the table. It is a film, just for everybody who doesn't even know what we're talking about. It is my latest short film that's coming out, produced by our nonprofit production company, the Reclamation Society, co-written by Nathan Scheck, directed by me, and it is called Disclosure, and it is essentially about a woman who's trying to understand what the truth is and then who knows the truth. And so she's interviewing different people about UFOs, aliens, and the associated paranormal phenomena. So we're going to get into a lot of that stuff and talk about that stuff. And then hopefully when you see the movie, you'll have a good time. I think one of the things we talked about doing was watching some trailers first so that everybody has kind of a feel for what we're doing. I'm going to play 2 trailers before we jump into the conversation. The first trailer I'm going to play is one from the perspective of somebody who is a priest. So we'll jump into that trailer first. You guys good with that?
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. All right, let's do it. Let me play this one.
Do you believe in God? We believe in the paranormal. We see the demon-possessed. They sparkled like topaz, and all 4 looked alike. Each was made to look like a wheel, intersecting a wheel. Is it possible that God created other beings on other planets? Sure.
There you go. That's trailer number 1, and we'll play another trailer just to give you a different perspective.
What is Sicario all of?
You get me not talking about Sicario here. Okay, so here we go. Yeah, this one is a little bit more of maybe the military perspective that you may have heard out there.
What I know is classified.
There you go. There's two of the trailers. By the way, if you go to my YouTube channel, you can watch. There's 5 trailers, and it gives you some other perspectives too. So you're not just dealing with the 2 perspectives that are like it's spiritual stuff or it's just military stuff I can't talk to you about. There are some other perspectives that are we share through the other perspectives of the characters. So you can check out those trailers. But that gives you kind of a little bit of a vibe for what the film is kind of trying to accomplish.
You know, Jay, I want to say too, right now, in my opinion, right now, I think it's a perfect time for this kind of film because we're seeing a lot of stuff. I don't know if you guys saw recently, there was some footage of a missile like splitting in half, trying to take down a UFO. You saw that? Jay?
Yeah, I did.
I mean, and there was testimony about it and stuff. So I really feel like that, like right now, especially, there's a lot of interest and a lot of like, there's more. I don't want to say like full transparency on this stuff because I still think there is a lot of you know, secrecy around this stuff. But I feel like there's an attempt by the government to sort of get a little more transparent in regards to what's going on out there. So I think this is the perfect time to sort of have a film like this and kind of like, you know, dive into what's going on, because I think there's a lot of people out there that's wondering. There's more and more evidence out there pointing in the direction of like, hey, you know what? We're not alone, dude.
Well, you've even got the government admitting it, which for the longest time the UFO community was like, you know, they know something, and now they're openly saying it, and you're like, why are you saying this? And is it like, which part of the truth is this? Because if you're admitting this part, there has to be this other. It's like a glacier, like underneath there's so much more than you can see. And so I actually think since the government has disclosed things, there's even more questions that have arisen about like, okay, if you're admitting this, then what else is there that out there that we don't know about?
100%.
That's so true. And I think, OG, that is somewhat of what's inspiring the film at this point in time. Like, because the question is always like, why write this film and why do it now? You know?
Right.
And I think part of it is because this is a really compelling topic that a lot of people are curious about, and there's a lot of information out there. It's harder to hide information in the modern day, right? We have, it's like, oh no, that like, so what we tend to find ourselves facing is that we all have this desire for knowledge and this desire for, in this case, disclosure, and yet we know that we don't know exactly what's true or what's false or what's accurate and what evidence exists or what evidence doesn't exist. But what we know is that we're being lied to. There's another trailer where the woman, one of the first things that the woman says is, well, we have to assume that the U.S. government is lying to us, right? Like
that's always a good place to start from.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that that's what makes this, for me personally, what makes it really fun. And I'm also putting together a video just for filmmakers, talking about like filmmaking inspiration and where you can draw inspiration from. And that's one of the things that I think that we can think about as filmmakers is like, what are some of the things that are popular in the world? Because you can go the IP route, and we talk about this on OG55 all the time, that there's like, hey, there's the Marvel IP, there's the Star Wars IP. Well, I don't have permission to go create material or films in those universes. And the reason why Disney keeps hanging out there is because people know those. It's easier to market them. They're familiar. As an independent filmmaker, one of the things I can do is take popular topics that people might be searching for, that people are interested in. I can take those and then apply my filmmaking to that. And it's kind of like getting IP because it's public interest as opposed to needing to use some other marketing vehicle. So that's one of the reasons we chose that as a subject to.
Well, and an interesting thing too, I think one of the secret ingredients or the secret sauce, right, creatively for, you know, a company, like let's say a studio like Pixar, right, is that curiosity factor, right? Like, what do your toys do when you're not around? You know,
Right.
what would a whole city or society look like if it was you know, like monsters, you know, or what do bugs do on a daily basis, right? Like Pixar really tapped into that curiosity factor, and I think that's what really has made Pixar and what really driven it to success. So things like this, when you can tap into the imagination and tap into that curiosity of like what's out there, you know, I think it's good stuff, man.
Well, that's something that's been a theme of humans as long as history's been around, of wondering about these things, which is what fascinating to me. Is the more you find out, the kind of older things tend to get. You find more discoveries, and then they were all looking upwards all the time, whether that was astronomy or whether that was stuff falling from the sky, whether it's meteors or other things like this we could talk about. Now, I am curious. I think you may have mentioned it. I get a lot of X-Files vibes off this, which I love, because I love the X-Files. I need to rewatch that show. But is that like an inspiration a bit on this? Was like kind of the X-Files approach and how they kind of took the storytelling a bit?
Yeah. So when we talk about inspirations, so I'm going to answer that question, but it's going to be a little bit of a roundabout answer. The inspiration first started from me listening to podcasts. So that's where it came from first. It was me listening to primarily 3 podcasts. I'll throw in a 4th one in there that I listen to pretty consistently. If anybody's ever heard of the Julian Dorey podcast, really good podcaster, a guy who's really good at, because he's a younger guy. He's a very colloquial guy. He's not trying to speak above like anybody's, but he's a very smart guy. And he's from New Jersey. Julian Dorey has a great podcast. And he's interviewing a lot of these people who have been UFO experiencers. And he's just able to get them into a comfort level where they're just telling them things that you don't hear on other podcasts. So big shout out to Julian Dorey, because his podcast was an inspiration for this film for sure, because he even is willing to interview people that like most people like Rogan, who also interviews a lot of cool people that I like listening to. But that Rogan doesn't interview. So, for example, we just watched the trailer with Father Alvarez, the priest in our film, who has a perspective that it is spiritual forces, right? Well, on Julian Dorey's podcast, Hugh Ross, a guy that comes from Reasons to Believe, an organization that I've actually been on their YouTube channel before talking about storytelling. Hugh Ross was on the Julian Dorey podcast talking about these phenomenon and saying like, I'm going to be honest with you, I think it's mostly spiritual. It's not mostly extraterrestrial. And so when you hear that perspective and you hear him talk about why he feels that way and the evidence that he's seen that leads him to believe that way, you go, okay, there's a point of data that's really fascinating. And then you hear somebody else like a Diana Pasulka, who we have a character that's kind of like a Diana Pasulka-esque, Diana Pasulka-inspired character. And she's like a hardcore researcher. And so when she talks about this stuff, it doesn't sound like an experiencer who's like, oh, I had this experience. It's like, no, I've interviewed all the experiencers. I've done all the military research. Here's what I'm telling you makes sense, and here's what doesn't make sense, and here's why. And so you listen to that perspective, and you go, oh, that's a different perspective too. So what I was trying to do is I was trying to take all these perspectives that I've heard from the enthusiast to the researcher to the priest to the military person who doesn't want to tell you anything because they're trying to keep things secret, whether they have access to the technology or whether we develop the technology and we don't want it to get into anybody else's hands. Either way, they don't want to tell you. So I'm just taking, Julian Dorey, the Danny Jones podcast, which was formerly known as the Concrete Podcast. Danny Jones has a fantastic podcast. And also Rogan and the Sean Ryan Show. And the Sean Ryan Show gets into a lot of this different stuff too. Yep. So I'm taking those 4 podcasts, which I listen to frequently, usually when they're only about topics that I care about. So I don't just listen to them all the time, but if it's about government inner workings, if it's about CIA, FBI, if it's about aliens, if it's about paranormal, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go listen to that podcast.
I'm kind of the same way, especially like Rogan, depending on who they have on. It's interesting. Yeah. Although the first guy you mentioned kind of reminds me of Art Bell, who I would say is maybe the guy that really brought a lot of this into the mainstream. Of he had on everybody to talk about this stuff, and some of the stuff being wild, but he would seriously interview them and like give it thought. And I always respected, like, I think you could tell when Art didn't really buy it, but he would hear them out.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like where a lot of guys, Graham Hancock, I think, kind of got his start on Art Bell in many ways. But unfortunately, Art's no longer with us. But I do like to listen to some of his old episodes because he was great at what he did.
He was amazing at what he did. And by the way, if you ever want to hear like something really funny, I would have to go find this podcast or this radio program because I listened to it live. But he had somebody on, Art Bell. And I'm pretty sure it was Art Bell. This was a long time ago, so it could have been a different channel, but I'm pretty sure it was Art Bell. And he was pranking his audience a little bit. And it was someone who had seen the Star Wars re-releases before they came out in the theaters for everyone else, and this person was just pranking everybody. They were like, "Guys, I'm going to tell you something, and you're all going to be really mad. But George Lucas changed Darth Vader's pants, and they have white stripes on them."
This makes everybody upset. Yeah.
Funny.
Yeah.
I was laughing
love
so
it.
hard. People would call in and just get furious about what the things that had not actually been changed. So shout out to Art Bell.
Art Bell is such a gangster too, because you're messing with like Star Wars, which is like the most toxic. Like people get so like invested in that, and to go for that is hilarious. I have a question actually about disclosure, Jay, but
Sure.
before I do that, I want to actually also mention another radio podcaster, Phil Henry. I don't know if you guys ever checked him out.
I haven't checked that.
I have not.
Oh, he's an old school guy, but he does voice work. And he calls in on his own show in a different voice.
Oh, that's cool.
And he's pranking people. So his guest is actually him.
That's awesome.
But in a different voice. And people call in like all outraged because it's always something that's like trying to like trigger people.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
I appreciate that.
Oh, me
like
too.
I like a good troll from time to time.
Yeah, he's fantastic. He's been doing it forever, man. I mean, he's a old school guy, really, really funny. But I wanted to ask you, Jay, in regards to disclosure, in regards to like what we have, like what 5 teasers now, you know, like 30 seconds to a minute, you know, kind of teasers. The vibe I'm getting is this short film will be sort of like testimony, I guess, from various individuals, and that testimony will sort of tell a bigger story. Is that a fair assumption as to what we should look forward to in regards to the film? Or?
It's very similar to that, and I realized I didn't finish answering Jared's question. So Jared also is inspired by the X-Files, but not as directly, because I started watching the X-Files after I'd already come up with ideas for the script, and I was like, oh, I want to go back and see what other people have done. And I realized that the X-Files is addressing a lot of the similar kind of topics.
Right.
But it wasn't like I had watched a bunch of X-Files and then written the script. It was like I wrote the script, and then I was like, I'm going to go watch X-Files now.
What's funny is I think a lot of X-Files episodes were directly inspired by Art Bell episodes.
Oh, totally.
If you go through that and kind of chronologically look at that, you're like, oh, I see where you got. Yeah, that's kind of always interesting to me.
100%. So yeah, so to answer your question, OG, here's something that I think I've been thinking a lot about with storytelling, and I think that other people can probably think a lot about with storytelling. So this is going to be a longer answer to the simple question that you asked, because the simple answer is yes, but the question is, how did you get there? I think is the kind of like the interesting part. So we have another film planned, and that film is around a similar topic. And I can't say too much about that one because it'll be too spoilery for all of them. So we had that planned, but that was going to require me renting out a really big blackout studio, creating a fake hotel room with walls in it, because I want one shot, and I'm being an annoying director who wants that one shot, and I can't get it unless I do all this fancy stuff. And also, my co-collaborator, Lucas Colombo, who helped with No Vacancy, who was a DP on No Vacancy, I would work with Lucas any day. He's awesome. But he's also super busy. So he's not easy to get a hold of. He's in California. I'm in Colorado. Much more difficult to get a hold of. So I had turned to Nathan Scheck, my co-writer, and I had said, how would you feel about DPing a film? He's never DP'd a film before, ever, right? I'm like, how would you feel about DPing a film? Because I'm going to direct this film. And we co-wrote it together, and I'm like, Nathan is a very technical person. He's never going to show up on a show like this because he doesn't want to talk about the stuff. He doesn't want to be, he's not an extrovert. He's not interested in being the center of attention in any way, shape, or form. And so
like George, right? Pretty much, kind of. No.
Yeah, the opposite of George. If George is unbuttoning buttons, Nathan is buttoning buttons up.
All the way to the top, yeah.
All the way to the top.
He's probably really good at what he does. Those guys that have known her that way are just like about what they do, and they're like, I don't care about the other stuff, which is always kind of refreshing.
Exactly, and he's a very technical person, right? He's a web developer in real life. So I was like, hey, this is the way you have to think about this is similar, just applied to creative efforts on the filmmaking side. So he said, sure, I'll try it. And I thought to myself, I'm a really big proponent of test and learn before you pay a bunch of money to do something that you're not sure you know how to pull off. Right. So we had this short film that I wanted to film. We have a feature film or feature film script that we're working on right now related to both these films. But I was like, this is still kind of hard and it's still more expensive than I would like it to be. So I'd like to reduce the budget and I'd like to make it easier for Nathan and I to make a film that we think is of high quality, but it's easier to pull off, right? So what are you doing? I'm trying to remove complexity from this situation, right? How can I remove complexity while still making it interesting? And this goes back to Jared's question, where did the inspiration come from? Well, I'm hearing people on podcasts that I'm listening to for 3 hours, them talk about this topic. Why am I willing to listen to someone just talk about it and not see a visual of it and not, like experience a special effect around it? Because it's that interesting to me. The topic itself is that interesting to me. So then I'm hearing different perspectives on it. And I'm like, oh, there's inherent conflict in each one of these perspectives, because the person who shows up and says it's all spiritual is in direct conflict with the person who's like, no, it isn't. It's an alien and it came from another planet, right? So from a storytelling perspective, I'm thinking about this and I'm going, okay, I need to reduce complexity of the movie I'm trying to make. I'm finding these discussions to be very, very interesting. What if the discussion is more about what these people's research and experiences reveal, as opposed to we're going to show spaceships flying through the sky, show aliens landing. Now you're talking about the budget just skyrocketing, right? Then I also go, it's pretty interesting for me to listen to these people sit at a table. What if the entire film takes place around a table? Now the onus is on me as a writer and as a director to make sure that the writing is real fascinating, because if I get off that track at all, you're like, snooze fest. We're only going to be at a table the whole time. So that is something that I'm very concerned about. It relates to how we choose music. It relates to how we cut people's longer statements, how we film them, all that kind of stuff, right? So that's really what started to contribute to how do we share these ideas that I'm now very familiar with, having listened to a bunch of podcasts on. How do I share some of these characters inspired by real life people who I've found really fascinating, and how do we put them in a scenario where there's conflict, but there's also not a lot of other things I have to do as a filmmaker? And so that kind of is thinking about this project. I have $15,000 to shoot it. I have a table in a really dark room. Like, how do I make this interesting? And how do I make this so that people will want to watch it? And so that's where the topic comes back up as being really important, is the topic has to be compelling and the viewpoints expressed have to be compelling, or else I lose. And so that's what we're trying to accomplish. Have we accomplished it? We'll see on November 1st. You guys will tell me, right? But
100%.
That's the goal.
No, I love this. And we've seen this a lot. We talk a lot about theme parks at OG55, right? A lot about theme parks and how the logistics of certain things have dictated the creative process to some degree. Yes. Some of the most iconic things in Disney parks, the stretching room in the Haunted Mansion, yep, that long winding queue for Indiana Jones, all of Indiana Jones Adventure, all those things were done, which are creative masterpieces, really. But all those creative wins were birthed out of logistical necessity to get out from underneath the berm and the railroad tracks to the other side, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, I like this idea, Jay, that you're kind of bringing here, where it's like, I have a budget. I'm an independent film director. I'm not working with like a huge budget, like an MCU movie or something like that. So I got to work within my own, perimeters here. What can I do? How can I tell a fascinating story in that perimeter? And I love that. And some of the best, like I said before, we've seen it so many times. And the Disney theme park stuff is just one example, but we've seen it so many times where I think a lot of times that those logistical hurdles can really birth a lot of great creative stuff. So I love this concept. When I saw these teasers, I was like, this is the way to go. Because you know what? I also feel too, this is a grounded, from what I could tell. I hate to make too many assumptions, but I feel like this is a very grounded story, right? Because you mentioned, like, obviously we can't do like the UFO landing and crashing and this, that, and the other. It's a big budget thing. I would prefer this, even if you had a Steven Spielberg MCU budget, I think I would still prefer this approach, because this taps into that imagination that people have. Like a person like me, I don't know, Jared, you're the same way. We talked about pyramids, you know, we're nerds like this. I love this idea where like I can watch something and it's like, it's a jumping off point kind of for me. Like my brain kind of goes into all these what if things. And I feel like this film will kind of do that for me, where it's like, it sort of triggers these creative juices in my own head.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you know what? Maybe you know, this, that, or the other. I don't know. I love that, and I think this is a brilliant way to kind of address logistics and even have that creative win. So yeah, I'm in. I'm in.
I think one of the issues Hollywood has had is the inflated budgets have actually led to less creativity, relying on the CGI to really overtake good storytelling. And I actually think if you look at, I think it was the first Deadpool had a very limited budget. And because of that, they had to get creative. I always think humans operate best when you do have, you're forced to think outside the box whenever you're limited in some ways.
Yeah.
And I think many times that can lead you to going a different route. And like, I personally think I like to simplify life and business as much as I can. I've always been very simplistic. Like if it gets too complicated, my brain's like, we need to narrow this thing down. And I think storytelling's the same way. It's like if you can nail it, if you can nail a story where it's just a table and people talking and it's interesting, then you can layer on top of that to create a better, you know, another story after it. But if you're able to do that, like I think getting back to basics on storytelling, which is one reason I like independent stuff for the limitations that forces you to be creative and do things like, yeah, we don't have the budget here, but we can tell, like storytelling is almost timeless in many of the things you can do, and you can apply it to different mediums. And so for me, I love that because I think it's, and we've talked about before, I think in the next 10 years, especially, the chasm between Hollywood and independent film creators is just going to continue to narrow with technology, that eventually you could do a UFO movie with the special effects. But, you know, where you're at now, it's like, this is a story we're going to tell, and it can grow out of that. But the topic, yeah, you're right. I can listen to 3 hours of Joe Rogan on talking to Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson, and I'm like, I could go 3 hours more. Like I remember I drove 16 hours from Missouri back to Florida, and I listened to 3 episodes of them back to back to back, and I wasn't tired of it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's like, I never would have said before, yeah, I would listen to 3-hour-long podcasts on a single trip, and I'm like, I'm into the entire thing. Like, so I think the topic is really good for that.
No, it's perfect, and it taps into our core humanity. This topic, you know, this core humanity, like, you know, what's out there? Where do we come from?
And where do we fit into it?
Yes, exactly. Where do we fit? How do we fit into this giant puzzle? It also kind of taps into. I think that's why religion, you know, is so. I hate to say popular because that sounds kind of like superficial, but like that's why people gravitate towards like even religion, right? Because you have that basic human core need or desire to kind of figure it out, and the alien stuff is 100% that same kind of thing that you can tap into.
Yep.
So I think it's brilliant. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I think some of what you guys have both said is when you apply it to making a film, you have to think of little things that come in that are okay. What is the most compelling way to put this on screen? So if I have a limited budget and I'm going to do a film that takes place at a table, well, now how do I film this? So now I'm taking my writer brain and turning it into my director brain, right? And I'm going, how do I shoot this so that it is the most interesting? So I'm going to bring this trailer back up to show it to you guys. So some of the things that that I start to think about are like, what if the people are talking directly to us, right? Because we are the ones that are hearing Joe Rogan talk to someone else, and there's a somewhat of a removal of like, I need to come to a decision about this because they're not talking to us. They're talking to Joe Rogan. So Joe Rogan can come up with whatever opinion he has on this person who's sitting across from him. But if we were to say like, how do you increase the conflict level of someone who has a viewpoint that I'm thinking about? Well, if they say it directly to my face, now it's different than if they say it to Joe Rogan's face or Julian Dorey's face. So now what we did was we said, okay, well, they're going to be looking directly at the camera and they're going to be looking directly at me as if I'm the one asking them the question. And now what it's doing in me as an audience viewer, we hope, is them going like, oh, this person's asking me to make a conclusion about this. And I'm not ready to make a conclusion about this. And then
like
we're adding conflict in the. Yeah, exactly. We're creating the dissonance. So there's just little choices we're doing. We're also putting these people First of all, we're removing complexity because it's shot in black and white, so I don't have to worry about color, right? There's a couple of the characters' costumes who I wouldn't have put, or I shouldn't say Jessica Toms, our wardrobe and hair and makeup person, who's phenomenal, by the way. We decided, hey, look, it doesn't really matter what color the guy's tie is. It doesn't really matter what color their jacket is because it's going to be in black and white. So does it look good in black and white? Awesome. Remove complexity. I don't have to find a red shirt. I have to find whatever color shirt we have is probably fine as long as it's contrasted right? So removing complexity is important, but also then saying, okay, we're going to have the lighting be to the extent to which I'm not sure if I'm supposed to trust this person's opinion or not. So now it's not only have I made them talk directly to me, but they're under an interrogation style lighting to the point where it's like, oh, the onus is on them to tell me what they think the truth is, but now the onus is on me to see whether or not I believe it, right? So there's these little tricks we're playing with just visually to try and get us into this story and get us invested in it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And this is what I love about you, Jay, because we get to kind of tap into that kind of perspective. Because as just a nerd, like a normie, I'm watching this stuff and I don't realize consciously these psychological tricks.
Yeah,
but they're there, and that's what makes great films. Is that and even like theme parks too, where you watch the stuff, and you're like, I don't know what it is. I can't consciously pinpoint why I like this thing,
right.
But it works. It's like going into Disneyland and going into DCA, right? It's like you walk into Disneyland, you're like, a normie is like, I don't know what it is about Disneyland, but I just feel so cozy here. It just works for me. I can't pinpoint what it is.
Right.
DCA is like, it's okay. I don't know what it is, but it's just okay. But it's those subconscious things, those subconscious cues, like you're talking about, the psychological tricks and this, that, and the other, that really dictate that people don't realize. So with something like this, a film like this is like when you take into account the black and white, when you take into account the face-to-face, the person watching isn't going to realize those things are impacting their viewing experience,
right?
But they 100% are. Another thing I want to also mention to you too, it's interesting with the black and white. I remember watching something, oh God, it was years ago, about I Love Lucy.
Oh yeah.
And they were talking about that, how the costuming and the color schemes were very different because it was in black and white. And like if you switched it to color, sometimes the stuff wouldn't work.
Yeah.
But because of black and white, certain color combos would actually work in that black and white format. So when you switch it, when you only have black and white, it changes how you costume, how you set dress, all that stuff, because it looks different on camera than it would in color. So that was also fascinating.
Yeah. And one more thing I wanted to pick up on that you guys mentioned that I think this is where my writing brain comes in, but it's also you have to maintain it when the directing comes in, is there's a book somewhere behind me. It's over there on the thing, called The Art of Dramatic Writing. And it's by a guy named, I think his name is Leos Agree, although I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. And he wrote a book about stage plays. This book is like pretty old. This is in early 1900s, I believe, maybe like 1920s or something. He wrote a book on stage plays, and I learned about it in college when I was taking a screenwriting course, and I read it. One of the things that he talks about that I think is something that a lot of modern filmmaking has drifted away from is something called the premise. And I reword the premise because when you say the premise, people will assume that like the premise is the same thing as as a concept of the film. They're actually two separate things. A concept of a film is kind of like people go to a park full of dinosaurs, right? That's the concept. The premise is better worded, in my opinion, as what is the shared human experience. And that's the part of the film. You can put dinosaurs in a park and people will show up because they want to go, wow, this is really fun. There's these big dinosaurs on the screen. It's fun. But one of the reasons why I think the first Jurassic Park has made such a big impact on filmmaking, whereas the rest of them have sort of been just monster movies that don't really have a lot of substance, is because Steven Spielberg understood that the shared human experience that we're going to have, that these characters are going to experience, but I want the people in the seats to experience, is what does it look like to see something that used to exist that exists now in the modern day.
Right.
What is it? What is the wonder that comes out of you when you experience that? What is it then to say the guy who doesn't have kids and doesn't want kids now has to take care of kids? That's a shared human experience that we could go like, what's the thing that I haven't wanted to care for, but now I'm forced to care for it, and then and in so doing, I actually develop a love and desire for it, right? And so these are shared human experiences that most humans can go around and be like, oh yeah, I've been in that place before, and it's not because none of us have been in a place where there's dinosaurs before, right? I mean, unless maybe a theme park that tried to simulate it again, but not realistically. And so the shared human experience is the thing that, in my opinion, must be present for your movie to be great. I don't think your movie can be great if the shared human experience is not present in that film. Otherwise, what you're doing is you're creating a film that may be pretty to look at. It may be really artfully done. It may be well directed. It may be technically proficient. It may be fantastic color grading, but it doesn't engage me because I don't have this experience. This is something else. You're not exposing me to something that I'm interested in. And that's where I think that the heart of film comes in. I also think it's where the truth of storytelling comes in, because otherwise you're just lying to me. If it's not a shared human experience, if it's not an experience that we've all kind of, and not every film can hit every single person. I'm not trying to say that. But for the shared human experience, I have to be able to find the other people that resonate with this. So if it's people like us who are really interested in how the pyramids were built, then that's a shared human experience. We think about how did this come about, and we don't know, and so that's a shared human experience, right? So I think that that's another really big component, that stories that don't have that, I don't think will go very far.
No, you're right. Jurassic Park is a great example where it's like there's that curiosity factor and there's that shared human experience, and then you put those things together. That's a recipe for success. Even like I mentioned earlier, Toy Story, it's the curiosity factor. What happens? Because everyone's wondered what happens when your what do your toys do when you leave the room? There's a curiosity factor, but then you also have, like what you were saying, Jay, that relatability with the human experience, the way these characters interact with each other, the way they, there's real emotion there.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, they're toys, yes, but like it's human though. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, you have to have that relatability. Otherwise, it's like, I can't. If you can't relate to it, you're not going to connect to it. So.
Well, and it's even like the popularity of the MCU. You're dealing with superheroes, or Jurassic Park, you're doing dinosaurs, but they're still at their core when they're good is the human element of these. Of I would love to be Captain America, but I have yet to find super soldier serum. But you're stuck in you have the morality things, you have the things that they're fighting for. And like you were saying, OG, about the theme parks, the way something makes you feel, and then you find out there's 1,000 different tiny little things that are taking place that culminate in that overall thing where you can't quite pinpoint it. Like, right. I've taken the behind the scenes tours, and it's like they would theme the trash cans a certain color, or you're thinking like, what does that make any difference? But when you take all of those and you apply it in the same thing with like a movie, then that creates sort of that thing where people come away a lot of times being like, I don't know why necessarily, but I feel a certain way with this, or I related to this character. And I think that goes back to simplicity. Like if you can simplify it down to the human experience on a lot of different topics, it plays to, I think, who we are as people many times, of being interested. And then like for me, when I watch a movie, I always think of like, what would I do in that situation? Which drives my wife crazy, because she's just like, okay, you're not in the movie. Like, I know, but this is making me mad, because if I was, this is what I would do. And I think that if you can get to a point where even if you're mad about something and maybe you're still into the movie, that you've done something to make someone care enough to be like, well, I wouldn't react that way, or why did they do that sort of thing? So I always like that, that end of storytelling, thinking about the little details that you just can't quite see unless you start looking like way, way deeper.
Well, yeah, and great storytelling will do that to you. Great storytelling will definitely will tap into your imagination like that. Yeah, that's why we all love Art Bell, right? Because because he taps into like that whole thing. It gets your creative juices flowing, and now I'm starting to brainstorm, and that's what makes his show so fun. So.
Well, that's the thing with like X-Files. They would go some crazy direction. Right. But then you're watching it and like you're seeing on the ground level. A lot of times even like Mulder and they didn't believe it, but then maybe something would happen as it would go along, and they like, okay, like you can change the perspective of your main characters from the beginning to the end of a story. And a lot of times the audience is along with them. Yeah. And I think if you're able to portray that properly, with the good storytelling, or at the least like questioning things. That was kind of, I think, a whole thing with the X-Files was like questioning stuff. Or Art Bell, Art would have people on, and like I said, you could usually tell if he was in on it or not, but he would hear you out. You could sit there and say aliens went to the White House last week and be like, tell me about it. And let the guy talk, and then he may just be like, well, okay, we'll see. But at the very least, like, you hear these things, and depending on how they're told is how you react to them. Does the person come across as credible? And that kind of goes into disclosure of each person talking. You may be like, oh, the military guy, I don't know, but that lady, you could have different feelings about each person that you're going to come away with a different perspective, whereas OG watches it and it might be totally different.
Yeah.
And I've always liked that sort of what is the end of the movie with Chris Nolan where they're dreaming. I'm dropping
Inception.
Yes, and at the very end, it's like, does the ring keep spinning or not?
Yeah.
And there's debate about it to this day about
right.
What was it? I love like endings like that where it's just not clear cut all the time.
100%. Jay, I have a question for you, but if you want to, I think you had a point.
I was going to say one thing about that. We actually even shoot it intentionally. So let me show you. We showed you 2 trailers, right? I'm going to bring this. This is the military trailer, okay? And you'll notice that we've shot for everybody from straight on, right? Now you'll notice that I'm also shooting this guy from a side profile, whereas if I go back to the previous trailer that we were watching, which let me go back to really quickly. What is Sicario? Me talking about Sicario again. So notice that when we shot, by the way, shout out to Art Razzo and Bobby Lee Black for playing these roles because they did a phenomenal job, and I was super excited. Notice how we shoot this character from a 3/4 profile.
Mm-hmm.
We're not totally sideways on it, right? Well, now, again, why am I doing that psychologically? Well, I'm doing that psychologically because Art is saying things that I find really compelling and that draw me into him. So I want to see more of his face when he tells me those things. But what the general's telling me is, I'm not giving you any information. That's not something I want to hear. I'm not a fan of what the general's telling me. So I'm going to show him from the side profile because I'm to a certain extent, I am starting to turn. I don't want to say dehumanize because that sounds like I'm turning him into a character that we want to like do something horrible to. But I start to trust him less. So I start to see only side of his face as opposed to more of his face. So even in these little tiny things, we're saying like, this is a perspective you probably won't like very much because I don't like it very much, right? The shared human experience is I don't want to be told it's classified. I want to be told what the information is. Right. So when a character is more authentic to us, we are then respond in such a way. But if they're less authentic to us, then we respond in a completely different way. So I just wanted to bring up an example of even how we shoot them based on what we're seeing from them.
I love that. Jay, I wanted to ask you from No Vacancy.
Yeah.
Your last short film, No Vacancy, which is phenomenal, to this one. Has it gotten easier, or does each film present different challenges where it's the same level of challenge?
That's a really good question. Okay, so the biggest challenge I had on No Vacancy was I had never directed anything before at all. And from a first-time director's perspective, it was a really easy way to get into that job title because Lucas Colombo was my DP. He's been a director. I signed him on as my co-director just in case I didn't know what I was doing, right? And that way, I felt very protected. I felt like we would still have a good film, even if I was not as good at the job, right? We had a lot more money to spend on that film. Lucas gave me a bunch of contacts to work with, so I didn't have to go find a bunch of contacts on my own. So to answer the question more specifically, the more difficult part of this film was I was going to be by myself. I didn't have a Lucas, and Nathan is new at being a DP. So no one on set is going to be like, hey, Jay, you're really screwing this up. You don't know how to direct things. So it's more on me than the last one was, so to speak, right? So there was that difficulty, although that I wasn't too worried about. The other part, though, is I had to serve as a much more of a producer on this film than Novak. I was a producer on both films. Producer just means I'm the one calling up to arrange where we're going to shoot. I'm the one calling up to negotiate things. I'm the one calling up to, put a green light. That's the actor we're choosing as opposed to this actor, right? Like I'm doing all of those things. I was a producer on both films, but this one was I had even fewer people to rely upon. I have a shout out to Maya, Maya was awesome because she came in as the casting director, which I can tell that story separately, but she came in as a casting director because another casting director had an emergency surgery and was like, hey, I can't do this for you anymore. So Maya was awesome and helped cast the film because she's a local actress as well. And I made her a producer because I'm like, Maya, you're really good at doing some of these things and you know how to do them. I'm gonna give you a producer credit on this film because you've been super helpful. But shooting in a location that I've never shot before, I don't have any actors that I know. I don't have a gaffer that I know. Is there someone in Northern Colorado who can light this the way that I want it lit? I don't know. I have to go find them, right? So that's a different thing about when you shoot in LA and you know Lucas, and Lucas goes, I know 10 gaffers that would be great at lighting this, right? So it's a completely different perspective on coming together to shoot something. Both films are performance driven. However, No Vacancy has more visuals around it than I'm capable of having with Disclosure because the budget's so different. So like I knew that the performers that I had to put on screen had to be exceptional because they're at a table. They're not running around a motel. They're like literally sitting at a table. Can you make yourself compelling if I was sitting across the table from you and having a conversation with you? And that's where Maya came in as a casting director and got us some amazing people. Like it was to the point where I was like, I'm shocked that there's this level of talent in Northern Colorado, a place not known for filmmaking, right? And so that was, and you know, I say Northern Colorado, people drove from Colorado. Our lead actress came from Colorado Springs, like they're coming from Denver. It's not just you know Fort Collins area, but yeah, I mean, like that was a big challenge. Was like, look, oh, here's a big challenge. One of the characters who's in so this film takes place in 1966. You guys wouldn't have known that from watching the trailers that you've seen, but it's a period piece. And that's apparent when you watch the film.
Well, and that also plays into the black and white thing. I love that because that would be kind of the time kind of, you know.
And it also helps because we're removing a little bit of complexity because I'm not going to put David Grush in front of you guys, right? Because like that's a modern person. I'm gonna put somebody in front of you who's like, okay, we've known this story, we've heard this story, we kind of understand what this is. So it's a period piece. Where was I going with this? Where was I going with this question? What was the last thing you just said, OG?
That it takes place in the 60s and that kind of plays into the black and white. It kind of
talking about the complexities.
Yeah. So complexities and hiring people and that kind of thing. I know where I was going with it. Yes. Okay. It takes place in the 1960s. It's about UFOs and paranormal phenomena. The challenge, I like to create films that have diversity in them, not because I'm trying to hit quotas. I don't care about quotas. I really don't care about quotas. I care about the story. But in my opinion, diversity amongst a population of opinions and a population of characters makes for more interesting stories most of the time.
Yeah.
However, in the 1960s, there were not a lot of women and or people of color that were really interested in paranormal phenomenon and UFOs. I'm not saying there weren't any. I'm just saying that it was going to be much more of a white male vibe, right? So one of the complexities that we had to deal with was that I had a character who was ethnically Asian. And so I tried to cast an ethnically Asian person to play that character. And the casting director was like, I can give you 3 people in Colorado that I know who are actors who are also male Asian actors. So good luck casting that role as that. And we couldn't. We didn't even get an audition. We got one audition who was auditioning for a different character. And we said, do you mind auditioning for this other character? Because we're trying to find more diversity. And he did a fantastic job. But he was we had to find somebody else who was more right for the role. So these are the kind of complexities that happen, right? Like the way that we imagined it was this way, but now you don't have that available to you and can't do that. So you have to change it up in your head. You have to come up with a different way of portraying this on screen. Sometimes you have to even come up with a different character, because the character that you had in mind just won't work, and you can't actually get somebody to fit that particular role. So that's what more of what I was having to deal with. And when we would show up on set, you know, before I had Lucas to be able to be like, oh, all you guys go do this stuff. I didn't have Lucas to do that anymore, right? And Nathan's very concerned with the iPhone that we're filming on and whether or not it's working correctly. So I had to be much more, and Maya was super helpful in this too. But had to be much more like, this is what your role is. This is what I need you to go do. This is what I need you to go do. And I had to be more in control of the entire set.
So there's a lot of stuff going on besides just filming the movie. You got to control the whole set. Yeah.
You have
Now-
to give safety spiels. You have another room where there's snacks, but they don't want that in the studio. So you got to make sure people don't bring the snacks in the studio. You got to make sure the actors are ready and happy in the other room because they're going to be. And these are all really great people. So I don't think that anybody's getting mad or anything like that. But there's no attitude problems on this whole film. But you have to make sure that, like, okay, do you know what you're getting into? Do you know how we're going to set this up? Do you know where you're looking on site? Do you know like what emotion we're dealing with right now? I mean, these are all of the things you have to keep in mind as they're also lighting the person, and you're like, I can't really see their eyes as much as I would like to see their eyes because of the way that the thing's going. Because we get another light in there to kind of shine up there. So this is so there's more on me. Whereas like, you know, maybe Lucas would have handled a little bit of that in our last shoot, or maybe our AD would have handled that a little bit more in the last shoot. Some of it was more on me this time, which made it a little bit more complex for me personally, which is why, again, I was taking complexity out of the film so that I would be confident in my abilities.
That makes sense. It makes sense.
So.
Now, given it's a period piece, you may not be able to say, is it based on an actual event that happened, or is this sort of in a sort of made up thing?
Oh, that's a really good question.
That is.
So I am... And I would label this as a science fiction film, but it's based on a lot of science evidence, whether you call it witness testimony, whether you call it research things, whatever you want to call it. But it's still a piece of science fiction, right? These aren't real characters. These aren't, you know, these are inspired characters, but they're not. I was
going to say inspired by events kind of thing.
Yeah. So I would say that it is, I would say that it one of the characters, if you watch the trailer, you can hear him talk about it a little bit, pulls out a folder and says, from all of my research on Operation Overcast and Paperclip, and he proceeds to talk about it, right? Well, Operation Overcast and Operation Paperclip were real events that happened. We hired scientists from Germany after World War II because we said, otherwise Russia will hire them, and we don't want the Russians to have the most advanced tech because German technology in the 1940s was some of the best technology that existed on planet Earth. We solved the atom bomb first, but they had rocketry before we did in the way that they had it, right? So we chose as a country, let's hire them instead of putting them in jail, right? Like, in fact, that's the Disney story because you'll see Werner von Braun show up on set with Walt and talk about, you know, the some of the stuff in Tomorrowland. So the short answer to your question, Jared, is it's not based on any one particular event. It's based off a character trying to understand from all this collective information that we have in the 1960s, 1966 to be exact, which ones of these stories are more likely to be truthful than the ones that are a lot more they're less likely to be truthful.
Gotcha. By the way, OG Project Paperclip would be a great discussion video one of these days. That thing, oh man, that is a rabbit hole you can go down.
Hey Jared, I'm always down, dude. Let's do it. Let's rock and roll. I love stuff like this.
Just invite me to the show. I'll be there.
100%.
Oh yeah, that stuff's super. Yeah, because it was like German, and I think it was also, wasn't it Japanese scientists as well? I think it was both countries that they nabbed from. That
yeah. I mean, it was one of those things where it was like, look, some of the brightest minds in the world have been applied to destruction.
Right.
What do you do with that though? Right. Like,
I mean, it was a known thing. My grandfather talked about. He knew, but he was never like active duty in World War II. But there was a known thing when they were on the battlefield, they would throw down their weapons to grab the German weapons. So a lot of the American forces were using the German weapons as they would come across them because they just performed better.
Yep.
All their different, handguns or automatic weapons they had back then.
Yep. Yeah, it's crazy.
Now, you mentioned you recorded on an iPhone. Was that something you normally did before? Because, I mean, I think that's a great thing with, and we were talking about before we started recording about how that tech has come so far.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's any, do you think the audience would know that unless you told people it was filmed on an iPhone? Or do you think
I don't think they'd have a clue. I don't think they'd be able to know at all. So with No Vacancy, he pointed to the poster behind me on the wall. With No Vacancy, we had 3 red cameras on set. And now, for those of you who don't know cameras, Red cameras. We were shooting with the same cameras that David Fincher shot The Killer with. The same cameras. Like they said, we shot on this, we shot on this, we shot on this. I went, oh, so did we, right? Like that. Like they are the best. Well, people will argue, and I'm sure that the cinematographers the DPs will all argue about this, but everybody has their preferred gear, right? But Red cameras are considered by many to be some of the best digital cameras that exist. Now, I have never shot on film. There's another guy up here in Northern Colorado that shoots on film that I would love to do someday, just to try something different. But digital is going to reduce expenses considerably because you're not having to deal with any kind of film,
Right.
So that it's much easier that way. Now, one of the things I said to Nathan, and this is about, again, removing complexity, is I said, the thing that's in our pockets, right? The thing that's here on my desk, this thing right here, this thing. Now, there will be some people in the comments that say, yeah, but film is different and film is better. But the pound for pound power of this will look better than most films shot in the 70s. Now, I know some people will say, no, film is better. And okay, fine. I'll grant you that. But when we start talking about like digital cinema, this thing is insane in its ability to record. So it does have its limitations, right? Like we used moment lenses, predominantly one moment lens. We tried some filters. We ended up not going with filters because we liked it with the look without the filters. But we were prepared to use filters as well. Also coming from Moment. This is a Moment phone case, actually. They should sponsor this video. But so why would we use lenses? Well, the iPhone has a certain range that it's going to film in, but maybe you want to film in anamorphic. Well, there's a lens for that. You can film in anamorphic. We didn't film in anamorphic, but we shot in with different lenses, and we could have Nathan on and ask him what lenses he chose and why he chose them. As a director, I just have to tell him the shot that I want, and he figures out how to get that shot right. And so I think that for us, that was, again, removing complexity. I don't have to have somebody on set who understands how a red camera works. And by the way, when the red cameras go down on set, okay, I have no clue, nor will I probably ever in my entire life, Lord willing, have to learn how a red camera works. I just don't care, right? I don't care how a red camera works. I care that it works, but I don't care how it works. But somebody needs to know that to troubleshoot. Why is this camera down? Why is this camera not working? Right? We had to swap out cameras if that were to happen. Similar type of thing to iPhones. I actually upgraded my iPhone to an iPhone. We shot on a 15. That was Nathan's phone. I upgraded to a 16 just in case his phone went down. We asked other people who had shot on iPhone what were some of the problems. They said things like our iPhone kept overheating. We had to have ice bags that we would sit on in between takes. Well, fortunately, Apple has fixed a lot of those problems, but that's why I also got a backup just in case that were to happen, right? So again, it's like, okay, so what does shooting with an iPhone look like? What are the increased complications? Making sure you have really good lenses is one of them, because you don't want to be zooming in and out and stuff like that and degrading quality that way. You'd rather put a lens on it to get what you want. We knew that we were going to have there's not a lot of movement in Disclosure, but we bought a gimbal because we wanted to test a gimbal shot where we did a in motion shot, and that might have actually worked. We just didn't have enough time on the day of to keep messing with it, and we hadn't gotten there yet. So we were like, scrap it. We've got other stuff to film. Like, we're not going to do that. So yeah, I mean, like, we kind of knew going in, these are the kind of shots that we were going to get. There's not a lot of moving shots. That makes everything super simple. So therefore, we just need different gear because of that.
Well, and that really plays into what we talked about earlier on in the show too, where there's never been a better time to be a entrepreneur, a business owner, an independent director, whatever it is. We all have the tools now, which is so exciting. You know what I'm saying? We all have the tools to make great stuff. We don't have to depend on a Disney or a Warner Brothers or a Paramount to release a film or to release content. We have the power to do that. You know what I'm saying? Which is, I think that's exciting, dude. I mean, it's funny because, a lot of people always talk about like, oh, the past, and they're nostalgic about the past, which the past is awesome. There's a lot of great stuff in the past too. But it's also cool to kind of appreciate what we got now, man. I mean, all our friendships, the three of us, this friendship was forged with basically the technology that we have nowadays by being able to podcast on YouTube
Yeah.
and this platform. And, this would never would have happened if it, in 97, like we would have never have found each other as friends. Jay, you're in Colorado, Jared, you're in Florida. We never would have known each other, but we all came together through this technology, which I think is a beautiful thing, man. It's exciting. It's an exciting time. Even though AI is scary, like that whole thing does freak me out. And yes, we are cooked. but on this particular thing, I think it's amazing. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Now, that's actually, I was going to ask that question. You brought it up. As a film director and filmmaker, what is your mindset around AI? Obviously, it's been a hot topic around movies and Lily, I can't remember, Norwood, I think, that whole thing.
Yeah.
Is it something that you feel you may utilize in certain aspects? Are you just going to be avoided at all costs? Like, is there anywhere you could see into the future as the technology gets better that it would actually improve your movies, not just to use it as a gimmick, but actually would allow you to get more out of like your budgets, like when you're shooting something?
Well, I'll give you a story that illustrates this point. Because if you ask me what's my opinion on AI, anybody who has an opinion on AI that's black and white is probably not thinking through the topic in as much depth as they need to, which is most topics.
Right.
Let's face it. Bring up whatever topic you want. If someone has a very black and white perspective, then they're not probably considering all of the things that could be going on. I mean, aliens especially, right? Or UFOs and extraterrestrials especially. But my viewpoint on AI is that I think that AI will be a very valuable tool for filmmakers. And I have used it, not on Disclosure. Disclosure doesn't have anything with AI, but No Vacancy, we ran into a situation where the script called for a photograph to be utilized. Well, guess what? I didn't have the budget to do. Fly actors out for a photo shoot prior to or after to filming this thing. It was already too expensive for what we were trying to accomplish. So I just started typing into, I think it was ChatGPT at the time. I started typing into like, here's the kind of photo that I would like to have you make for me. And it was, we got a photo. It appears in the film. It is a photo of what looks to be a guy who's in a big trench coat, and he's walking along, and he's carrying a bowling ball bag, just like the bowling ball bag that's central to the film. And I went, it looks pretty realistic as a photo, like someone took it and it's kind of blurry and stuff. This is before some of the newer iterations of ChatGPT where it made everything so clean that it was like, that's clearly fake because it's not accurate. This actually, like, it gave it a look that, because I was triggering it with like Polaroid type examples. So like, and the only thing that didn't really work is that the character who was supposed to represent or be representative of, we didn't digitally change or try to get that person's specific look, because that's getting into a gray area of like, am I trying to replicate a person? I'm not trying to replicate a person. We need to like be cognizant of that. So I just took this little Polaroid photo. I just took it and drew over the eyes. I just took a marker. I drew over the eyes so you couldn't see the eyes, and so it's kind of like someone was saying like, we don't want you to know who this is. And then I wrote in marker, I wrote informant ? Over the top of it, so there was question of like, is this the guy who's this other guy? Like just drawing it again. What am I trying to do as a filmmaker? I'm trying to say, I am not able to get a photograph of this person. I would prefer to do that. If I had all the budget in the world, I would do that, but I'm not able to do that. How can I then give the audience let the audience's imagination fill in the blanks? Well, it doesn't really look exactly like him, so I got to make it look less like him, so I'll just draw out the eyes. Why would someone draw out the eyes? Well, if it's an informant and they're not sure if it's the right guy, I could see somebody taking a marker and being like, yeah, I'm trying to hide this person's identity because they're an informant, right? So like things like that are going into these little tiny decisions. So I have used AI to help solve problems, particularly on the special effects side, which is where I think the AI will be most valuable. Mm-hmm. Where I do not like AI and where I think AI is damaging is, and I sent you guys a video from Casey Neistat because he put out a similar video about this. What I have learned about the creative process is that it is life-giving as a creator to have a creative process. Not to say I'm awesome and I'm going to do this thing and it's going to be meaningful, but rather to go through the process of wrestling. I want to go through the processes of wrestling. Like, what does this film mean? Why do I have this character say that? Why do I have this character say that? Why don't they change their words to be something else? Why does the script structured in the way that it's structured in the way in what I'm imagining it being? All of those things are a process of creativity that I believe is life-giving to humans. And you guys probably have your own creative processes. It may not be films, but you may be doing other things, whether it's YouTube videos. You may be going, I think this might look better than that. I think this might function better than that. I think that people will understand me better if I say it this way instead of that way. There is a creative process that is inherent to human beings that is insanely valuable. But if you hand that creative process over to a robot and you say to the robot with a very limited prompt, something like, I would like this, and it generates an entire show for you, what I think you've done is you've actually removed the humanity from the thing. Now, why have you removed the humanity? Any of these AI softwares are only pulling from other creators' creative processes and replicating those things, which means that two things have happened. One, you could have stolen someone else's creative process to utilize it as your own. It's definitely not inspired by, it's definitely stolen from, because it's not coming up with it on its own. It's taking data that it sees and then reforming that data into another thing that is entirely based off the thing that. So when I say characters in our story were inspired by another character, AI would just go, I'm going to replicate exactly what that character would be, right? And you'd have to kind of change that. So I don't like AI replacing the creative process. Now, are there, again, gray areas where someone could say, I'm going to wrestle with how we do this from a filmmaking standpoint and give additional prompts and additional prompts and additional prompts and additional prompts, and it's still coming from the human as opposed to coming from the AI? I think that's probably going to be a thing that we see a lot of, right? So I'm not like super against that. But what I am against is creating shows and films that are based off simple prompts and then expecting the shared human experience to be able to be replicated in that way, or shortcutting the human experience. It takes something away from the creators, and I think it takes something away from the audience as well. So complex answer, but AI is here to stay. We've all seen what it can do. It is not going to go away. How do we take the human part of the creative perspective and not just give it 100% over to bots, essentially?
Yeah. And I think the interesting thing too is everyone has a different value system when it comes to AI, right? Like a different threshold and a different standard. Like for me personally, as a creator, since day one, since I created my channel, I've always done my own thumbnails, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now I make a lot of content. I'm doing like 6 videos a week or something crazy, you know? So for me, I was always doing my own thumbnails. I was, doing all those, creating all those. Now for me, I can't pay somebody to do a thumbnail every time I drop a video because I just don't have that kind of money. I drop way too much content to pay an artist every single time. Plus it would slow down the process because I do a lot of topical content where if I got to go to Fiverr for the Fiverr artist to do the thumbnail, now I'm waiting 3 days for the thumbnail to come back, and now the story is already old news, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, I will full disclosure. See, I will actually use AI for my thumbnails because the only job I'm really replacing is my own.
Yeah,
because I was the one always doing my own thumbnails anyway, so it's not like I stopped paying this guy to do my thumbnails and now I'm going to use AI, so I cut his job. So I use AI for my thumbnails, but what I won't do is I won't something that I used to pay somebody for. So for like on my OG55 intro graphic or something like that, I will always pay. I always pay Fiverr, like the Fiverr artist, to do that kind of stuff, right. And I will still do that. You know what I'm saying, for my own stuff. So everyone has a different threshold, though. You know what I'm saying? Everyone has a different, like, what's okay, what's not. But I think you're right, Jane. Overall, there is a lot of gray area with this stuff, and everyone has to kind of figure out what this means, because this technology, you're right, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. No, it ain't going anywhere.
And just to comment on what you're saying, OG, too, like the heart of your channel is about your deep analysis and paying attention to what's going on with the Walt Disney Company. both on the company side, on the creative side, on all aspects of the Walt Disney Company. That's what your core is, right?
Yeah.
It's your core is not the thumbnails. The thumbnails are marketing to you. That's
Right.
different. So if you were to tell me that, hey, by the way, I'm just going to be AI OG, I would be like, well, okay, then I don't want to watch your channel anymore. I'm not interested in watching AI OG. I
Right.
like Orange Grove 55. I like that guy. So if all of a sudden you were replaced, that I would be sitting there and I would say, well, and when I say replaced, I mean, there's going to be creators out there. I guarantee you, there probably already is, that are their entire persona is the AI. Their script that they fed it was the AI. The whole thing is AI, right? And I'm not saying you can't do that. I'm not saying you don't have the right to do that. You can do whatever you want to, as long as you're not hurting other people by stealing their IP or whatever. But it just means that I'm probably not going to watch it, because I would much rather watch what Jared has to say or what OG has to say. I'm not as interested in the thing that... Now, am I interested in saying I have a question that I would like to ask a bot to draw information from all over the internet to give me more information and more news? Yes, I will do that, because that makes sense to me. But if I want to be connected to somebody, and if I want to feel connected to somebody, I don't really want to feel connected to a bot, to be honest. It'll be really good at replicating that, and people will do that. There's no question. There's already been people with AI girlfriends, but I'm not interested in that as a human. I'm just interested in other humans, right? So I think that's where the line gets to be a little bit more... But we've already had that with even out AI, right? We've had people that will use voice modulators. We've had people that will use... I mean, even our buddy Seymour was like, I want to show up as a duck. Now, that's funny.
Wait, he's not a duck?
You know what? Maybe he is. Actually, I don't know, because I've never heard.
Mine is now. I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah, and I get it. People want to protect their identity online. They want to make sure, like, the doxing thing is crazy, right? Like, I get all of those things, and I'm not. And this is not like a, hey, Seymour, you should show your face, because what you're doing.
Show your face, Seymour.
Yeah, I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is, I still get Seymour's voice. I still get his opinions, right? If all of a sudden you were to tell me, like, oh, Seymour's just replicated himself, or OG's replicated himself, or Jared's replicated himself, or Jay replicated himself, I don't want to see that, right?
Yeah.
Like, I want to see the humans.
I actually think we had this discussion on OG's channel. I was like, I'm very curious about, as AI becomes more of like what the audience reaction is to AI, if it's known that a movie has an AI actor or actress, and do audiences accept that? Because maybe it's my hope in humanity. I think people want to connect with other people. I think this is why theme parks have become more popular, because it's a shared experience and it's not fake. You're feeling something. A story's being told to you. And I do think you're always going to have that uncanny valley where, as good as it gets, even in video games, you can tell that's not another soul you're looking at. There's just something that's just not quite right. And it can have lots of utility, but I don't know if it'll ever replace real actors or actresses for that very reason. But at the same time, you were saying, I think things like this of being online and talking is what people will gravitate toward, because they're like, I know Jay's real, I know OG's real, and they go live, and I can sit there and interact with them and chat with them. And that is a form of human interaction through the technology. But AI, I just wonder about that end of it. But I think from the creative side, I'm actually really curious about large language models. And like, you could make your own Jay Sherer. This is my personal AI. You feed it the stuff of like, this is me, this is what I do. And it's an assistant. It doesn't take over your process, but it becomes part of like making you more efficient. In many ways, you could learn things about yourself by asking it. Like, it knows you, and you say, okay, what about me? Where could I improve? You'd be like, oh, I didn't think about that. And then I think that is where the utility of it could really be useful in making you more efficient or self-aware in many ways, and actually making products and whatever it is you create better if utilized that way. And I agree with you. I don't want something that an AI slop script to just pop out and be like, here you go. And like, maybe for kids shows, you could do that. Like, a lot of those are just mindless, nonsense anyways. But with like real actual art, I do think that may be the way in which it could be implemented, and it's not stealing, especially if you fed it your own stuff and like, these are my inspirations or whatever. That I'm very curious about.
Well, I will. Oh,
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was gonna say real quick, Jay. If you ever watch an episode of OG 55, when I introduced myself as OG 55555, and I have like 9 fingers on one hand,
Yeah.
OG
you know
is alive.
it's alive. Then you know it's AIOG. Then you know it's AIOG.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that they're like, to your point, Jared, I think that there will be a lot of content that is 100% driven, produced by, acted by, directed by AI. I think that that will just be a thing. Because, like, I'll give you a perfect example. Okay, I was watching a Star Wars short film that popped up in my feed, and I've made a Star Wars short film, which under Lucasfilm IP agreements, especially back in the day when we made this film about 10 years ago, they were like, hey, go make fan films. We love fan films. Go do it. Right. They've kind of backed off of that. I think
as long as you don't make money from it, because Star Wars Theory ran into this, but I think if you don't profit from it, you can still do it.
Correct. That's exactly what it is. And so we had made one, and so I'm kind of familiar with that world. And somebody else had made a film, and it was like a 45-minute film, and it was fine. Like, I'm sure some people would watch it and say, like, this is great, I love it, right? And by the way, we all react to creativity differently. So, but what I was shocked by was I went and read the comments, and the comments were like, this is so much better than anything you could ever see from Disney. And I was like, that is objectively false on every premise. The acting is not as good. The special effects are nowhere near as good. Like, all of these things are not true about this film that you guys are all saying is true. But here's the problem. Human beings will, when they hold a strong opinion and or ideology, will drift to the or things that share that with them, right? So if the AI can say, okay, I'm going to make a Star Wars film, and I'm going to make a Star Wars film the way Star Wars Theory and everybody who watches Star Wars Theory wants to see Star Wars films, the human condition, it almost pre-requires us to go, oh, I like it better because it was made for me. Yeah. And so the problem with that is that we will see a lot of AI stuff that will be, especially on a platform like YouTube that has there's very little governance to what's considered good or bad on YouTube. It's mostly, do I resonate with it or do I not resonate with it? There are very few referees, if you will, to say, like, that's stupid, we're not doing that today, get that off the channel. There is some refereeing going on YouTube, but not a lot. Not to the extent where Netflix is going, we're not putting that on our platform, we are putting that on our platform. Now, I'm not saying that Netflix doesn't put a lot of stupid stuff on their channel. They do put a lot of stupid stuff on their platform. But my point is that at least there are entities that go, this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad. And there's actually, like, they can see the artistry in that, they can see the creativity in that. So I think, but what we've seen is a democratization of creativity, which is good. We talked about shooting on iPhone. That's great. I wouldn't have disclosure if I couldn't shoot it on iPhone. But the problem is that the democratization of creativity also means that some people will begin to hand off more and more of that creativity to the bots, just so that they can get ahead, just so that they can get views, just so that they can attract a certain type of audience to watch that certain type of thing. And I hope that we start to, as a society, go, oh, we don't want that. We don't want more division. We don't want more just like, I get what I want. We need more coming together, understanding what other people's perspectives are, understanding the creative process that people went through, the shared human experiences they're trying to communicate. I think part of the problem is that one of the reasons we've gravitated towards that is we're all very irritated for the people who don't go through that process, who just say, give me that thing because I agree with it. Give me that thing because I agree with it. All of us will say, that's really annoying. I don't agree with that. And I hope that, hopefully I'm making sense. I hope we get to a place where we actually are not so ideologically or team-based oriented in our creativity, but we really still pretty much are. And that's unfortunate. And I think the AI will win in that environment. And I would like us to get away from that.
100%.
Yeah, it kind of depends on the content too of what it is. But yeah, I mean, I think on some level humans are very tribal.
Yes.
And so those things make a lot of sense that just terms of how humans are. But yeah, I am curious about which path AI will take, especially on the creative side.
Well,
and that's what I have is like, like cartoons are one thing. Like I could see that, but obviously I was playing around with Sora and made myself into an anime in like 15 seconds. I was like, good night. But like when it comes to like real life shooting movies with human beings, and if they're going to try and portray realism that way, that's where I just have I'm like, I don't know if you can, in terms of the audiences being like, yeah, sure. And I think that maybe you see the cartoon medium do a certain thing, but the real life one. And I actually was telling OG, I think there will be a chasm where you have studios that be like, we're not AI. We are all human based. And you can see little niches pop up that become, because I do think people are going to want something in a more digital AI world. They want to be able to know something is real.
Yeah.
And I think there will always be that desire. It's just, how does that manifest itself in entertainment, like all the time?
100%. And not to be tribal, but my AI Palpatine film is objectively a 10 out of 10. So
somehow Palpatine has returned again.
Yeah. And I did use AI. I made Mark Woodbury wear a hard hat with blueprints smiling. And I was like, I couldn't find one of Mark Woodbury, but AI gave it to me. And I was like, oh, it made the point I was trying to make. Yeah.
100%. And actually,
it's very useful.
And actually, just to give you a shout out, Jared, you have, and I don't want to get too far off the beaten path here, but your theory about Mark Woodbury being maybe Disney wooing him, and that's why they, oh, no, I'm sorry, not Mark Woodbury.
Oh, Mike Kavanaugh.
Kavanaugh, Disney wooing him, and that's why they gave him the co-CEO for Comcast is, I think you're on something with that, but I don't want to get too off the beaten path, but that was a good find right there.
Somebody was wooing him, and they were like, yeah, okay, you can be co-CEO, you come here, and they're like, okay.
Yeah, no, 100%. The timing was very sus. I'll say that.
Yeah,
but we'll see.
One of the things I was going to mention, Jared, I think that one of the things I've actually talked about with some people is, I think that you may even see a resurgence of things like people going to watch stage plays. For that same reason, right? Like, I know that I'm not dealing with AI if I'm at a stage play. And so I think that there's a component there that you may find, just like people saying, I'm going to go listen to vinyl, right? I'm just going to do vinyl. It's a very similar thing that I think might become more and more popular. But it's a fascinating world in which we live in. And I'm sure that the viewpoint that I have on the topic right now will change. Because, like, for example, I do think, to your point earlier, Jared, I do think animation's different. Right, like animation to me is not the same, because not that I don't respect the art and the artistry of animators. I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is, if I could go to somewhere and say, and I'm sure some people will find this opinion offensive, but I just feel this way. If I were to go to somebody and say, hey, could you artistically do some character designs for me that we will upload into AI, that AI will be able to animate, I would be like, that seems like a really good use of the technology, to be honest. I know it's taking the animation of characters out of a creative's hand and putting it in, but you know what? Somebody has to oversee that, so maybe that's still a creative position.
Well, computers did that with original animation.
Exactly.
I mean, I think people's beef with AI is the whole, and this is where I think the limitations are, is like it's only going to take ideas to formulate ideas. It's nothing brand new from scratch, and I think that's where humans. And I really think over the past 20 years, humans have been less creative. And I think a lot of it's in the environment of when you are scared of being canceled by a mob of people about ideas, you're not going to think outside the box because it's dangerous to do that. Right. But a lot of times, not everything outside the box is going to be a win. But then you think of something and you're like, oh, I didn't even think about that before. And I do think, and I hope that is the thing, that humans get more creative and we're willing to take more risks. Like, you can take more risk on a lower budget. There's not as much to lose, and you can test out an idea. But I agree that as much as I hate to say it, I think hipsters may have had a point going a lot of like analog in many ways, but I think that could become much more of a thing of like, hey, let's go see an actual play and let's go eat some actual food and hang out with actual friends. And I think some of the Gen Z have been doing that. They have like flip phones and putting their phones away. And I find myself many times throwing my phone in the other room while I do stuff, because I just don't want to be tethered to the things that bring with technology, but at the same time, you never have an off switch. I don't think that's good for people either. So maybe as humans, we can kind of find a happy medium with all this and not let it just, become where we all have cyborgs and, we're just constantly online with every notification, dinging us at every moment.
Well, it's interesting too that you mentioned the cancel culture element, Jared, because you might be on something with that. Because what have we seen? Because American culture is very, very much entrenched in this cancel culture. I do think it's waning.
It is waning. I do think that's definitely waning.
Yeah, it's definitely waning, but it's still a thing. But what have we seen in entertainment? We've talked about it on my channel a lot. How Asia has kind of taken over entertainment, music, even animation, all this stuff. Why is that? Why is anime so big? Well, anime doesn't kowtow to being politically correct. A lot of times you see girls with big old, and machine guns and stuff. But in American culture, that kind of thing is toxic, though. So it's kind of
To a
like in
certain segment, yeah. It depends on where you're at for sure, I think. But yeah, no, I'd
Yeah,
agree.
you know what I'm saying? So it seems like in Japan, for example, Japan's more willing to sort of do the like those kind of things, and they're not worried about getting canceled or it looking toxic or this, that, or the other. You know what I'm saying? They lean into that. Where in America, it's like, oh, we can't do that. Oh, we can't do that. It's you stifle that creativity.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
And I think that's where you get a lot of remakes for that. Remakes are deemed safe. It's like, well, if we remake Back to the Future, which never do, and Robert Zemeckis says, as long as he's alive, they're not going to. So long live Robert Zemeckis. But it's like I think that's why that gets proposed. They're like, well, people know this, so like we'll just remake this. It's safe, and it's like sitting down and having conversations with certain people are trying to stop. In that they don't like what you're talking about, but through conversations and pushing ideas and boundaries, even my own personal beliefs, Jay may say something to me that makes me think a little bit more about what is my, instead of being, oh, I don't like that, that's uncomfortable. Well, okay, let me go through my process here, not just have a visceral reaction to it and really think it through. And I think things like that is what has made some great stories. Even Lord of the Rings, a lot of that was based off of Tolkien being in World War I and seeing the atrocities of that. And how did he process it? Well, he ended up processing it, wanting to have a lineage and a story for England in many ways. And so there's a lot of offshoots that happen from life experiences and culture that affect the entertainment and stuff that I think a lot of people looked at very linearly in terms of just one way or one dimension, I guess I should say, of how that could affect things. And I think the weird aspect of that has been the lack of creativity when it comes to entertainment in many ways. Now, TV, I think, has been more creative and taken more chances with streaming, but movie side has been much more, let's remake Lilo and Stitch, let's remake all these things and just, make money and not really, think too much here. But which is why I love National Treasure. That is probably my favorite movie of all time is National Treasure. But
I love
and the
it.
rumors are there's gonna be another one, but I don't believe it until they actually get Nicolas Cage on board. But we'll see.
It's interesting too. Like that human inspiration is so important. Like I know for like Disney animation, one of my favorite animators is supervising animator Glenn Keane. Right? He created the Beast. He created Rapunzel and the Little Mermaid. Right? Ariel. But when you hear him talk, and even Tarzan, when you hear him talk about these characters, he took inspiration from his family. I believe Ariel was inspired by either his daughter, I think it was his daughter or his wife. And then even Tarzan, when Tarzan's maneuvering through the jungle, the trees, when he's sliding down the branches and all that, it was inspired by his son skateboarding, right? You're not going to get any of that though with a robot. You know what I'm saying? Like it takes that human experience to kind of pull that inspiration from. And I think that's why his stuff works so well. That's why he created some of the best characters of all time. Not even just Disney, like just in cinematic history, right? Because he borrowed from his human experience and there's a soul to it, It's not just data,
Yep.
Yeah, it's 100% true. I think there's a couple things that I would pick up on too. Like the film industry has consistently relied upon IP. Because if you even go back into the earlier days of film, and let's just even say even the 40s and 50s, which is not the earlier days of film, but they're when film was experiencing kind of a level of growth that was becoming more and more popular. A lot of them were based on stage plays, or a lot of them were based on books. I think that the challenge is that I think we have seen multiple things in society come to a head at the same time, which makes creativity much more difficult. One is the cancel culture aspect of things, right? Where it's like, here are the things you can and can't talk about. And I think that that has gotten to that. I had a conversation one time with a Twitter friend of mine, only ever known them on Twitter, respect them very much. So this is not a criticism of them, but I was shocked by this viewpoint. Because the viewpoint that they held, very progressive person, right? I have friends on all sides of every aisle. And this person was very progressive, and this person was saying, I don't like death in film. And I was like, wait a minute, death in film is one of the most poignant things that I've ever experienced. Having seen a death in a film and then experienced death in real life, like these are like strong human emotions that we bring to an experience. I also very much believe that you can do escapist things, but you should not only do escapist things with engaging with film, especially. You should engage in films that are difficult, like Jared said, difficult for you to deal with and being like, oh, I have a hard time with that film. You should still do that. You should still go through that process. Not that you can't also escape. And I love my favorite movie, Jared, is Raiders of the Lost Ark. I have a poster right there.
I would say maybe like a perfect movie, close
amazing.
to it.
It's amazing, yeah.
Yeah,
it's amazing, and so escapism is not that there aren't deeper themes to that movie that are present, even though it's an adventure movie. But I think that one of the things, so this conversation I was having with this guy was, he was saying, I don't like death in film. And I'm like, well, why not? Like, why don't you like death in film? And he was basically saying, I'm going to put words in his mouth, but he was basically suggesting that putting people in a really uncomfortable emotional state related to the death of a character is almost like it's not fair, or it should not be a thing that's done to people, and it's not something. And this is where I agreed with him. I agree with him on one level. He was being more black and white again than I would have been, but I agree with him on the level of like, it should never be done and used as a cheap way to get to someone's emotional state, right? Because I think that's unfair. But he was saying it shouldn't be utilized at all. And the fascinating thing was, he was a really big fan of The Acolyte. He thought The Acolyte was a 10 out of 10. I think The Acolyte's a 2 out of 10. I hate The Acolyte. I think The Acolyte is absolutely garbage. He's 100%. He can 100% have that opinion, and I'm not judging him for that. I'm just saying the work is not my favorite work. I do love Andor. Do not love Acolyte. And I said to him after watching one of the episodes, I go, bro, you and I had a long discussion about people dying on film. They just wiped out the Jedi party. Like, in a matter of moments, they just wiped everybody out. Not only did they wipe everybody out, I was not really supposed to care about any of them, was I? Because they didn't matter at all to the story, or I wasn't invested emotionally. He was like, yeah, that's why it's good. That's why it's okay for them to do it that way, because you're not invested emotionally in any of them, so it doesn't hurt to watch it. And I was like, man, we are talking a different language about how we think about creativity, about how we think about storytelling. Because to me, and so I think that there's this pervasive idea that you should never feel uncomfortable. Yes. And I'm not saying that you should always feel uncomfortable, or that you should just put yourself in uncomfortable situations every day of your life. But the shared human experience is, we are all going to die. Even if they come up with transhumanism ways of keeping bodies alive for longer, or transferring thought processes to computers, it's not that's not called living. That's called something else. But everyone will die. And even if they are able to reverse engineer the human body so that it never dies of natural causes, you can still die because you turn the wrong direction on a one-way street, or whatever happens to you, right? So the point is that if we live lives that are only the point of which are only seeking comfort, I don't think we're actually living a life, to be honest. Yep. If that's our goal, we are now turning into the Wall-E characters who just go around and are mindlessly engaging in stupid things. So I think it's cancel culture. I think it is this idea that you're never meant to feel uncomfortable. I think it's the idea that people with other viewpoints should be vilified as opposed to befriended and actually dealt with and actually have conversations with and around. All of those things are leading us down paths where AI would be very dangerous to us. I don't think we'll get there, because I think we'll come back around to the other side and we'll figure it out. But I think but I just think that that's where it gets to be really, really creepy, because you're kind of like, if the only point of my life is to be entertained by a screen, AI will do that and make me feel comfortable because it's been curated to me. And I don't have to listen to Jared's point on that. I don't want to listen to Jared's point. Jared upsets me. Okay, well, I'm just going to listen to whatever AI tells me I want to hear. That's crazy.
Yeah. That is. And the whole point, not to get too much off on a tangent, but the whole point of, like, death in film. I mean, I know from the Disney's perspective, some of the most memorable moments in Disney history, or even cinematic history, has been from those deaths.
Yep.
Look at how the Mufasa's death shaped that entire movie.
Yeah.
That movie would not be as good if
Oh, no.
Mufasa didn't die the way he died and the interaction with Simba. It's uncomfortable as
Yeah.
hell
And it's
to
still
watch
hard
that.
to watch. It's still hard to watch as an adult. I remember as a
Yeah.
kid, and you're just like, you know, it's tough.
It's
Yeah,
rough,
I mean,
man. And Bambi too. I mean, those are tough moments, but they make those films so much better, right? Go ahead, brother.
The first 8 minutes of Up is some of my favorite filmmaking of all time because of the
it's
couple growing old together and the wife passing away.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's like in life, I have a sports background. I look as like myself as a Christian and like always playing sports. Pain is part of it. Like you're always looking at yourself being like, oh man, I screwed up. I got to get better. Like I'm always self-evaluating. So if you want to be a better athlete, you're going to deal with a lot of pain. You're going to have to, or you'll never get better. If you're just like, I want to be a great football player and you never do anything that causes you pain, you're going to be terrible. In many ways in life, if you want to grow, it forces you to deal with pain in many ways. And so I've always felt sports is a great analogy for life, for business, for all sorts of things of being comfortable with being uncomfortable. And once you do it, you get used to that. And the uncomfortable conversations aren't as uncomfortable because you're used to that discomfort. It's like if someone goes and works out with me, it's never worked out, they're going to be like, this is horrific. And I'm like, I enjoy this. But it's just all about perspective. And I completely agree with you. I think you're just living a life of much less potential than it could be, of allowing yourself the opportunity, I think, to deal with those, overcome those, or changing perspectives and whatever that is. And like I said many times, it's like realizing where you fall short personally, and you're like, I need to improve this way and improve that way. And that involves pain too, of basically being like, you know, I'm not a perfect person and I have to improve in these ways that is not easy to do. And I think that's something that as society people have gravitated much more. I just want to feel good and comfy all the time, which makes for very soft and mushy people.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're 100%. 100%, Jared. I completely agree with you. Where it's like this current, and I don't want to totally like, you know, crap on younger generations or whatever, but because it's not, I hate to paint with too much of a broad brush, but in general, you're seeing more and more of that, right, Jared? You're 100% spot on with that, where people are afraid, you know what, I don't want to have an uncomfortable conversation. So you know what, I'm going to ghost this person, right?
Yeah.
I'm just going to ignore them and just have them go away. I'm not going to confront my friend and say, hey, look, this is bothering me. Can we talk about it? It's uncomfortable, yeah, but you need to do that. But a lot of young people don't do that. I'm just going to delete them off my social media and just pretend they're not there, right? The easy way out, so to speak, you know? Even dating and stuff like that, it's all on the apps now. Why? Because it's easier to just have the girl ignore you on an app than it is to actually walk up to the person at a bar and try to have a conversation and she reject you face to face, right? But see, the risk, when you eliminate the risk out of life, you also eliminate your big wins. Yes. The risks are what make the big wins. Like, you know, if you're always playing it safe, you're never going to win big.
Dude, those wins feel so good when you've had to struggle for them. And then you finally get it. And it's like there's like in sports or in life, it's like you get those wins and like there's nothing that you can describe and how that feels and knowing the things you overcame. And that's why I always tell people, I'm like, you're cheating yourself. And yes, you can avoid the pain, but you're also avoiding the joy that you get on the other side of that pain. Even if you're working out, it's like, I remember when I first started working out, I couldn't bench press the bar. I remember vividly in front of everybody in my freshman class, and I couldn't bench press the bar. And the day that I was able to get when the 45s were on there, the amount of pride and joy I had of like, I came from this to that. It's really hard to describe. And I really hope, I want people to experience that, because then that fuels you further to keep going and applying that. And it's just sort of a cycle you have in your life. I find that it's sad, but at the same time, it's always like, I hope that there is a shift toward understanding that, like, maybe with AI, people realize they need more of the personal relationships and the struggle that comes with that. And that AI, whatever it is just a cheap imitation of what you can actually like experience.
Well, it's like in this content creation space, right? We've all been in this space for a really, really long time. You know what I'm saying? We've all been making content, and it's like, there's that like reward, that pride when you hit a milestone, right? With your content or whatever, like you've earned it. You went through the blood, sweat, and tears to get there. Now,
when a person who was talking back to you, you're just talking into the darkness, as I call it. Yeah.
100%. So when you hit that, 2,000 subs or that 15,000 subs, it hits different because you worked for that, as opposed to some creators who will buy subs
Mhm.
But they didn't go on that journey though. That's not going to feel good. You know what I'm saying? But when you earn it and you struggle and you fall and you work for it and you really try to up your game and you hit that threshold, man, it's like, wow, man, I did it. You know what I'm saying? You feel good about yourself. You know what I'm saying? So
Mhm.
yeah, the work is part of that reward, and 100%.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah. I think too, I actually think that the younger generations are better off than our generation, to be honest. I think we're probably all millennials. I know I'm like an elder millennial. I'm at the top edge, man.
I'm
Like,
a millennial, yes.
Me too, yeah.
I barely made it in.
You're almost Gen X, huh?
I'm
Almost Gen X.
Gen X, not quite. And one of the things that I think happens, and I think this is a naturally occurring cyclical thing, is that the generation that comes behind the previous generation is somewhat responding to all of the problems in that previous generation and trying to make an adaptation for those problems, right? So like one of the things that I think about a lot is I think, and I've said this to people before, I don't think I've ever said it on a podcast, but you know, the boomer generation, I think is probably rightfully, and we have evidence to prove that it is one of the most frustrating generations to millennials. And I am consistently frustrated with the boomer generation. However, culturally speaking, the boomer generation, this is what I'll say about them. And there's way better videos that have been done on this, but they were basically set up for success. And they did put in hard work. I'm not discounting that at all. They did put in hard work, but in the post World War II generations, particularly if you had like the greatest generation followed by the boomers coming up out of the economic prosperity that the greatest generation had set up post World War II in America, it was not, I'm not saying it was, I'm not saying that it wasn't hard to become successful, to make more money than your parents, to do all these kind of things. I'm not saying it wasn't hard, but what I am saying is the deck was stacked in your favor. So it doesn't mean that everybody made it, and it doesn't mean that that you know, people weren't experiencing hardship. I'm not saying that, but the deck was stacked in your favor. Lots of economic indicators to prove that. Lots of worldwide maneuvering that has proven that. And so when the boomers would say things like, "This is the truth of the matter," then what did Gen X do? Gen X went, "Man, that's not the truth of the matter. That happens to be a perspective that you have that I'm going to actually kind of poke fun at and make fun of the way that you've structured your lives." Well, then millennials came along and went, "Well, Gen X, you can't just live life making fun of somebody else's viewpoints. You got to have your own." But there was still a rejection of what the boomers had said. This is the way you should live life. So the millennials said, we're going to rewrite the entire playbook. And the entire playbook is going to look very differently than it looked for boomers, because for boomers, they screwed a lot of things up. There wasn't as good as civil rights. That we weren't as environmentally conscious. We were just sending rockets into space and we didn't care, right? So we're going to go ahead and act differently than that. We're going to come up with social consciousness is more important. Who cares about the economic thing? We're never going to have a good economy anyways. Let's not worry about that. In fact, let's become more socialist in the way we think about the economy. That's a reaction to Gen X not having a value system and the boomers having a value system that has been rejected partially by Gen X and almost fully by millennials, right? What I think is nice is that Gen Z and Alpha are seeing the millennial response and going, well, there's some big problems with that too, guys, actually. So I think that what we're going to see is we're going to see a reactionary period where people go, yeah. In fact, I've heard this about Gen Z. They're more traditionalists, right? They're looking at like, how are some of the older generations? How did they think, and how is it different than what even my parents are thinking or my aunts and uncles are thinking? So I think that what you're basically seeing is society trying to figure out what is truth, and where does truth lie? What is it? Is truth objective or is it just subjective? And how do I deal with that? And you're just seeing reactions to what that truth could be. And so I think that actually we may be better off with Gen Z and Gen Alpha than we were in our generation, because I think our generation had some really good ideas, but sometimes those good ideas were antithetical to the way that the world actually works and is set up to work.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting too how each generation, you laid it out perfectly, Jay, but it's interesting too how each generation is a check and balance. It provides checks and balances for all this stuff. So one generation will introduce a new way of doing things. The next one might not completely revert from that, but they'll maybe have a different perspective or kind of have a new take on that, and it kind of balances the whole thing out, right? It's kind of a beautiful natural process.
I actually have a lot of hope for Gen Z. I think they are a very interesting generation. I know a lot of people immediately, you crap on the younger generation, but the things I've seen, I they could take the good things from certain ones, not all the ideas, and basically like, okay, we're going to take the good stuff here and kind of put it in our own little mix. Yeah. And I think they do have a lot of potential and hope in the way they look at that. So I do agree.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, as all of us as Gen Zers here, I think we can agree on that, right?
yeah. Put the AI on that makes me look 10 years younger.
Yeah.
Or no, it'd be like 20 years younger at this point. Yeah. Yikes. I'm an old man. Any other questions you guys have for me about disclosure, or should we wrap up? We're going on an hour 45. If anybody's stuck with us through the discussion of generational differences, then good for you guys.
Yeah.
Leave us a comment down below. Be like, tell us what generation you're in. If you made it this far, tell us what generation you're in.
Down below. No, I don't have any questions. I just want to say, I think after this discussion, I think we can. It's pretty clear that that aliens killed the dinosaurs.
It's definitely possible. I agree. Yeah. No, I'm really excited to check the movie out. I'll have a lot more. I'll have a ton of questions afterwards. I'm sure I'll be blowing you up on text, being like, "What did this guy?" But yeah, I'm excited to check it out, and I love the topic, and I'm very curious. You're teasing the coming movie after this.
Oh yeah.
So about what is the culmination of this one, and what does that lead to? I'm definitely intrigued.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. When you guys watch the film, I'll be able to actually talk about that stuff too, because I'll be able to say like, oh, okay, so this is why this inspired the feature script, and here's why we're working on the feature script in this way. Unfortunately, because it is, and short films tend to fall into this category a lot. There is one very important, very intentional plot twist, and that I can't go into because it'll be a giant spoiler, and you won't even want to watch the film if I give that away. And so you should live with the discomfort of not knowing what that is, so that you can have a better experience.
I'm just gonna say it's probably the lizard people.
Hey, I can't say it doesn't. I can't say it doesn't.
George makes a cameo. No.
Yeah. George comes in and says,
with his chest hair out, like,
yeah.
I drink deep, George. Yeah.
And we go, oh, that's a reptilian right there.
Yeah.
I've identified one. Yeah. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate you both coming on. OG55. So for those of you who don't know, the Story Geeks podcast, which used to have its own channel, used to be a dedicated channel all to itself, used to have a pretty big following on the podcast version of it. I don't know how many years ago it's been, OG, at least 4 or 5 years now, huh?
I think so. It's been a little while.
It was right after the pandemic, because my whole team, I had a team of 6 people that was working on this thing with me. They either had kids, they had job changes, or they didn't want to talk on podcasts anymore during the pandemic, and it just fell to pieces. And I said, OG, I've got this thing called the Story Geeks. We talk about storytelling on the favorite movies that have come out this year or whatever. Sometimes we just got into video games and stuff. And so for those of you who don't know, the Story Geeks podcast, which does not show up as often as it should because I am too busy creating movies to be able to create content, is on the Orange Grove 55 channel. So that's how I got connected with OG. Always love being on all of the OG invites me to more videos that I wish I could do, but I just have. The other day he invited me to be on a show, and I'm like, I want to do this show so bad, but I literally have to give feedback on the latest edit of this film so I can get out on November 1st. So I did not have time to do it, but that's how I got connected to OG, because I really respected that with his channel, he wasn't just about we love Disney or we hate Disney. It was a nuanced approach to a not black or white, but a gray area approach to how might we look at these things slightly differently as Disney fans. And I loved that perspective. So, but yeah, you should go subscribe to OG55. OG, tell them where they can do that.
Yeah, well, thank you, Jay. I appreciate you, brother. And yeah, you can find me right here on YouTube, Orange Grove 55, where I'm always chatting with these fine gentlemen, blowing Jay's phone up like his needy girlfriend. I'd be blowing this guy up I'm like, Jay, can you come on the show? No, but I always love having Jay on, and it's always a good time. I always love having Jared on as well. We always have great conversations over there at OG55. So check us out, talking theme parks, movies, streaming, the pyramids, aliens, all that good stuff. And Operation, what was it? Paperclip coming soon.
Paperclip,
Yeah.
So, but yeah, Jay, congratulations on Disclosure, and looking forward to watching it November 1st, right?
November 1st. It's coming out November 1st. So yeah, get your popcorn buckets ready because we'll be watching it. And what we plan to do, just for everybody watching too, is, and I'll do this for anybody who has a channel out there who would like to watch the film, have a couple of the cast or crew, if they're available, join us to talk about it as well. So that you don't just get my perspective. Obviously, my perspective is one perspective, but it's also really fascinating. You know, we didn't watch the trailer for Jeffrey, which is he's playing a character named Dr. Townsend. And one of the things I do with actors is I tell them, I say, take the character on the page and you can write your own backstory. You don't need to hear my backstory for this character. You can write your own backstory. Just run it by me so that we're on the same page as a director and an actor on where you're coming from with some of these things. And Jeffrey wrote me up a page and a half of this is the character's backstory and here's where he's come from and here's why he does what he does. And I said, that's awesome. I only have one tweak for you. If you make this tweak, I think we'll be on the same page. He goes, perfect. He makes the tweak. He said, that's great. And there we go. We get a more fully functioning, realized, lived-in character because he's fully bought into that character and embracing it as his own, as opposed to whatever I have in my mind, right? So it's really fun to hear other people's perspectives. Is my point on that, right? Like they'll have their own perspective on the character. They'll have their own perspective on how it all came together. So if anybody out there wants to, host us, I'm sure we'll host just like we did for No Vacancy, although it can be available publicly because this is not going on the festival circuit, so we can just release it. We'll do a watch party and come watch it with us and then ask questions in the chat when we're done watching it. That'll be really fun stuff, and can't wait to do that with everybody. Jared, tell folks about your channel and how they can subscribe over at your place.
Well, first off, thanks for having me on here. It's always a good time. I always like how our conversations delve into like 900 different directions, but it all makes sense, and I enjoy all of it. So it's always a good time. You can find me at Cap the Magic. I cover similar to OG theme parks, entertainment, pop culture. And then if you actually are looking for any theme park related specific content, my wife and I have a podcast at CTM Podcast where we talk about that stuff. So that's where you can find me. At Captain Magic, basically everywhere online. I try and keep it kind of simple with, I grabbed all those handles I think that are available, so I should be all those places.
There we go.
Perfect. Yeah, I have had some of the best conversations being on the Orange Grove 55 podcast, being introduced to Jared and getting to know him better. So you should go check it out because it is a good place to be subscribed. You can also subscribe to my channel here, How Stories Work with Jay Sherer. We're going to try to do this as a collaboration feature that YouTube just released. I don't know what that means yet. So supposedly you'll be able to subscribe to all of us down below.
Perfect.
We'll
Perfect.
So check out Disclosure. November 1st comes out. And check out Orange Grove 55 for the latest updates on what's happening with the CEO search. And if you have more specific questions, Jared's done some awesome coverage of even what's going on with Universal. I mean, they opened up their ride again. That is it a dangerous ride or is it not a dangerous ride? Go listen to what Jared has to say because he's pulling some pretty good views in with that video. So definitely check these guys out. And in the meantime, let me know what you think about aliens in the comments below. What do you think? Do you think that they're just angels and demons? Do you think that they are extraterrestrials, interdimensional? Is it all just made up and it's the government just messing with us? Let us know in the comments down below, and we will see you guys on the next show. Bye.
Hey, guys.
All right, ready.